think it was UFC number 2 or something like that, that he ended up getting involved with the organization from that point on.
Yep. And, I thought your match a couple of nights ago at Hordern Pavilion, Moore Park, was absolutely brilliant. I started to do commentary about it, like referring to greats George Hackensmith and Frank Gotch. I wasn't alive back then, but I just thought what we saw was a fantastic array of technical wrestling, brawling, some shoot style, all the way up into the to the bar, back to the ring, submissions. How do you feel about that match? Because a lot of the fans that were there thought it was absolutely off the charts and were talking like stars, like almost a perfect match and all sorts of stuff. But what was your thoughts on the match?
Well, no, I'll just simply say that chaos. That might be a one simple word just to sum it all on up. Both Ken and I, we come from some of the same background, some of the different background. He came up as being a wrestler. I came up as being a wrestler. He came up through a big difference. I would say he came up through the foster home type of aspect, and he maybe had a little bit tougher lifestyle, stuff like that. That grew up, and maybe combat arts probably played a little bit.
Yes.
More in his life than mine growing up on a farm and that, so
Yep.
I'll just say it's this has been an interesting trip in the sense that I got to at least interact with him a lot more, and kind of to know where he comes from, and vice versa.
Yeah, that's great. And of course, Ken's got, in the opinion, I guess, of many, and plus like reading about the sport, Ken's got more of a striking background, obviously extremely competent in submission, but yourself, you're more into the holds. You wouldn't consider yourself as striking, although most people certainly wouldn't want to be hit by a left or right hand by you, Dan. But
Well, no, you're exactly right there, Greg. I always tell people that, especially when the UFC first began, you either came from the striker category or the grappling category, and I definitely fit the format as the grappler. Grapplers could have been anyone from judo, jiu-jitsu, sambo practitioner, or just an amateur wrestler. It could have been just a professional wrestler.
yes,
My first profession was I was a professional wrestler. As of the 1992 Olympics, I jumped into professional wrestling, and then by 1994, I jumped into the Ultimate Fighting Championship, known as the No Holds Barred era.
yes, great. And as the expression goes, styles make fights, which I think has also made things interesting in both the wrestling and the UFC octagon, because sometimes if you've got two fighters that have exactly the same style, sometimes the match doesn't always quite live up to expectations. But if you've got that contrast where one's more of a striker, one's more of a grappler, one's a little bit bigger, that can actually lead to interesting twists and turns in the match and makes it a little bit more unpredictable, I think. What do you think about that with the different styles clashing?
Oh no, you're exactly right there, Craig. That was one of the things I think in the early Ultimate Fighting Championships. That was the appeal of it. It was this wild west arena where you had various disciplines. You had athletes that were predominantly from one discipline or the other. They might have been just a karate guy, just a judo guy, just a jiu-jitsu guy, just a wrestler, just a sambo practitioner, just a sumo wrestler, and they all climbed at this cage knowing that there were only two rules: no biting, no eye gouging. And there was unlimited time. There were no rounds. There was bare-knuckled action. You had an 8-man tournament. I don't think you could have gotten any rawer of a format than what that was.
Yes, and it was basically no holds barred in a cage until years later the Athletic Commission started to crack down, so to speak. But that was, I think, probably for the health benefit or safety benefit of the fighter, and and also just to help try to keep the promotion out of trouble, because it was no holds barred, and there was a couple of serious mixed matches where you had like about a 400-pound guy versus a 200-pound guy, but that was the whole thing, to get the fans' imagination. It's like, well, let's see what happens in a real fight if you put that, and sometimes the guy who was significantly smaller actually won the fight.
Well, I was going to say, in the scenario that you just described, that was Keith Hackney,
Yes.
a Kempo karate man that probably stood, I'll say, 5'10", 5'11", somewhere in that range. Went up against Manny Yarbrough, something like a 6'6" or 6'8", 440-pound sumo wrestler, and on that particular night, David slew Goliath.
Yes. No, look, absolutely. And it was also interesting, if we flash back to the 1970s, I think it might have been 74, or was it 76? Many people say the precursor or so on to UFC and mixed martial arts was that infamous match, Muhammad Ali.
Muhammad Ali versus Antonio Inoki.
Yes. And
the special referee was Judo Gene LaBelle.
Oh, isn't he a legend? I've got a photo of him that Rick Drazen and the late great Rowdy Roddy Piper organised for me, and I mean Judo Gene LaBelle, just fantastic. And sometimes he pops up in movies, some of the classic stuff like Bond.
He plays a lot of bit roles in a lot of movies, and it's surprising how many movies he actually has been in that I recognize now.
Yes, no, it's interesting like that, and also a couple of old WWF guys as well. Mr. Fuji, and was it Tojo Yamamoto or Saito? Mr. Saito showed up. A lot of these wrestlers from 1970 to 80 were in a number of films, if you go looking. And I know you've been in a couple of films and also TV series, Dan, too. So it's always interesting when you see the grapplers show up.
Well, I mean, look at, right now, who's the top earner? In the film industry, you've got The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. Where did his background come from? I mean, he's second or third generation professional wrestler.
Lovely guy as well. And what I really love about wrestlers and some of these people like yourselves that can really handle themselves is it's always a pleasure to speak with you. You see sometimes things on like TMZ Sports or news or tabloid stuff, and you worry about how these blokes are going to be to talk to, but sometimes the more capable the bloke, sometimes they're like just lovely people to deal with, but of course you wouldn't want to cross any of you guys in a dark alley
Greg, one of some of the
wrong thing. But,
some of the unique things about me there, Greg, is the fact that I work with a lot of first responders.
Nice.
And have been. So I work with law enforcement. I work with corrections, air marshal, border patrol, and military. I've never been any of the above, even though I kind of look like G.I. Joe a little bit, because I've got the Dudley Do-Right chin, I've got the mustache, I look like law enforcement. But I've never been any above, but my gift is physical mechanics.
Yes.
And, I've been doing a specialty with all of these sectors as a ground combative. So military has a ground combative, and law enforcement, corrections. It all depends on what kind of equipment are you wearing, what other type of you're wearing a duty belt, or you're wearing a taser, all the equipment that's on your body. So it's really interesting how I went from being just an amateur wrestler to becoming from an amateur wrestler to jumping into freestyle wrestling in high school, my freshman year in high school, and then by my sophomore year, Greco-Roman wrestling, and then by my freshman year in college, I jumped into judo and started competing in judo events, and then I jumped into sambo, and long about the early 90s, I think around that 91, 92 time period, I jumped into my first tough man contest. Then I was going over to Japan doing the UWFI Japanese organizations, and then the Ultimate Fighting Championship came along, and I'll just say that my life has just been one continuous elevation after the next.
Yes, I've been following it for quite a while, and also what I also noticed in professional wrestling. Traditionally, a lot of the wrestling promotions and the promoters wanted real tough, legit guys to be their champions. I mean, of course, the wrestling world lost Harley Race about a month ago.
Yes.
But on a throwback, when you go back into the history books of professional wrestling, especially in America, the Gold Dust Trio comes up, and you're talking about guys that could literally like tie people in knots, and people that could probably knock you out in a couple of seconds, or make somebody submit, because the promoters wanted a champion that would protect the belt so nothing would happen. You needed somebody tough that could basically beat just about everybody on the planet. So you brought that to the NWA.
That's exactly what I was. I was a throwback from days gone by. I mean, I did not know a lot about the history of the NWA until it was brought up that the organization wanted to put the NWA strap upon me.
Yes.
And that came throughout a match down in Smoky Mountain Wrestling with Jim Cornette's organization, and the champion at the time with the NWA belt was Chris Candido.
Oh, yes.
And so that's who I ended up winning the belt off of. And then I'll say on a sad note or low note, I think there were only 3 promoters left in the world at that time. And I ended up giving the belt a great deal of exposure. I traveled to quite a few different countries, representing the NWA, defending the NWA title belt. Then it was walked out. I think the only time ever that the NWA belt or a professional belt was carried out in an entourage to the UFC cage. I had Dennis Carluzzo. He's long gone now, but Dennis Carluzzo from New Jersey was a gentleman that carried the NWA belt out proudly. And I had a couple other my friends, and Eric Hebestreit, Gaza Kalman. I'm trying to think if there's 2 other gentlemen. I'm forgetting it right now, but they were dressed up in the Stars and Stripes uniforms, and they had T-shirts, and they're throwing out to the crowd to where it was like the first time anybody was actually kind of playing to the crowd, promoting. I've always been a big flag waver. I'm a big patriot, yeah. And then I even told all these guys, I go, "You guys are the show." I said, "Don't touch me. I have to focus, and I have to take care of a job tonight. Not just one job. I have to take care of 3 men." Yeah, wow. I go, because we may be looking to do this show, but if it backfires and I get TKO'd or something like that, then it's not going to look good. Well, it was it prevailed. I ended up beating 3 people, I think, in one of the shortest time periods ever.
Yes.
Disposing of 3 people, and it was great because I posed inside the octagon cage with both belts, and it was the first and only time, to my knowledge, of a professional wrestler holding up the professional title belt along with the current UFC title belt.
Yeah, it was great. Look, I love it when you see wrestlers that also have the credential in martial arts, because if you're a long-time wrestling fan and you respect wrestling a lot, and in most cases you also respect combat sports a lot, it's just, for me, it's a great feeling to know this guy could handle himself with just about anybody in the world. And it's sort of like doing the wrestling profession proud by having such a tough, capable martial artist wrestler that people just can't mess with it. To me, it's just a good feeling that, with the legitimacy of pro wrestling, having the right sort of champion.
No, that long, and I got confirmation because along the way, to give you one classic example, I had never met Bruno Sammartino.
Okay.
But all of a sudden, out of the blue, he calls me up on my personal cell phone. I've never met the man. I don't even know how he got my cell phone number, but he did. Yeah. Calls me up out of the blue, tells me who he is, and he goes, "I hear all the good things that you're doing with the NWA belt there." He's like, "Keep up the good work there, young man," and all this kind of stuff. And then eventually, I was at one of these Comic Cons or something along those lines, and I got a chance to meet him firsthand. And then a few more times after that, when I found out that we would be at the same event, I would go out of my way to go over there and just to shake his hand again, and just chit chat with him about anything and everything. He's one of the classics from that throwback time period. But then after I had the belt for, I'm not sure if it was 4 or 5 years, I held the belt the first time before relinquishing it. But I ended up being invited to the Cauliflower Alley banquet that takes place out in Las Vegas, Nevada, on an annual basis.
Yeah.
And I think Howard Brody was, I think might have been the president at that point in time. And he's like, Dan, you really need to be out there. And I'm like, I don't know what's up, but I get out there. Well, Lou Thez was the president of the Cauliflower Alley Club, and they were, he's up there talking, and I mean, it was a great presentation. I got a chance to meet again a lot of the, the professional wrestlers before my time.
Yes.
Just the older, more classic wrestlers. But then, Lou Thez then presented me with my own personal MWA belt. I mean, he said a lot of wonderful things. So to me, that meant a great deal to me to receive a belt like that. And even a different story after that time. I forget the gentleman who was doing an interview with me, but he had proposed a question that I had never been asked before. He said to me, goes, who would you like to have wrestled for the NWA belt or defend the belt against, whether living or deceased, if you could have your dream match? And at the time, that upcoming weekend, I was supposed to be heading off to England. I think for the weekend for a few matches. I said, let me think about that. Now I'll get back to you, on a Sunday night or something like this. So basically, I flew to England. I'm out on this. I do my couple matches. I come on back, and that late on that Sunday night, I just type out my response and give you the quick Reader's Digest first. I simply said that this is the first time I had ever been asked this question, regardless of time, who would I like to have stepped into the squared circle with? And I go, and at that point in time, there were a lot of famous wrestlers like Stone Cold Steve Austin. You had The Rock. There was The Undertaker, of course, at all times. Hulk Hogan still was very relevant. And so I said, these are a lot of the current names. I go, but I said, I've always been referred to as a throwback from days gone by. So it would be more probably befitting of a Bruno Sammartino, of just of this time era. I go, but after I did some research, and I found out, did a little more history of the NWA, some of the people that have been for the longest time holders of the belt. I mean, Ric Flair, they held the belt for a great deal of time, and but the all-time leader of the pack was Lou Thez.
No, nice, yeah, what a master he was.
And my comment there goes, I said, by all rights, I said, Lou Thez. I go, Ric Flair might have always said he was the man, but Lou Thez was the man.
Yeah.
He held that title belt longer than anybody else. I said, so it would be right that I would like to have stepped into the square circle with Lou Thez. Now, I typed that all up and I emailed off to the gentleman, and he gets back to me. He goes, have you heard what has happened? I said, well, no. And Lou had passed away the day before.
Oh,
I did not know this.
Wow, that's the backstory.
And then I ended up going to an event, and part of the event they were honoring Lou Thez. And basically, they asked me to get up there and spoke, and I told that story and stuff like that. That just, kind of just, well, it sent chills kind of down my spine, just because, I had just sent that off on that Sunday, and I think he passed away less than 24 hours previously, and I was oblivious of it altogether. But I bumped into Lou on a number of occasions, first going over to Japan, working for the UWFI organization, and then between him and Billy Robinson, they enjoyed watching me work because they saw how I understood the physical mechanics and could do the least amount of work to get maximum results, and they were a joy to be around.
Yeah, look, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that story, Dan. Now we're just going to take a quick break and with our technology, and we'll be back in a moment to continue with the interview. Okay?
Sounds good.
One moment, Dan. Thank you.